The photographer edits the meaning and the patterns of the world through an imaginary frame. This frame is the beginning of his or her picture's geometry. It is to the photograph as the cushion is to the billiard table, which that's interesting to think about. And that is a quote by John Zarkowski, who is the former director of photography at the Museum of Fine Art. And when I was just starting in photography as art, I happened to be in New York, and Dwayne Michaels was a photographer that had an exhibit there. And seeing what he did with photography, with poetry, with combining different images and storytelling just blew my mind. So I love hearing a quote by the director. All right, so let me tell you about today's guest. Jack Zigon is an architectural photographer who is based in, I am tongue-tied today. He's based in Philadelphia, and he's not just your average architectural photographer. He loves capturing the built environment. I'm going to ask him what he means by that. And he also is an amazing landscape and nature photographer. If you're looking on YouTube, you'll see his nature photography in the background. And he says he loves to use light and composition to create beautiful photographs with a wow factor that makes your clients want to stop and stare. And he has had 8 different careers, starting businesses, is a Comcast internet marketer, PR for Israel, Jewish community relations work in Delaware, ran his own management consulting firm, sold computer hardware, managed a training department for a trucking company, and a publishing firm. So the moral of that story is he understands what it takes to get businesses to pay attention and request his services. So, hi, Jack. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, Lucy. It's good being here. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'd call you a slacker, but
Well, as I said, I have trouble figuring out what I want to do when I grow up.
yeah. I was going to say, what do you do for an encore? But clearly you decided to do photography. So how did you decide to start a photography business?
I've been photographing pretty much since a teenager. My dad was an amateur photographer. He carved leather, and he would photograph his leather craft and create how-to articles. And so I watched him doing that kind of educational photography growing up. And I've always enjoyed landscape photography and was selling my prints probably starting 15 years ago. People liked what I did. And then when I left Comcast, I was like, okay, what do I want to do next? And people said, well, you're a good photographer. Why don't you go do that? And since I've started businesses before, I knew how to get one started and how to get clients. And landscape photography was not a good way to make a living, whereas architectural photography, commercial photography pays a heck of a lot better. And I've got an engineering background. The built environment is all of the buildings that human beings have created, as opposed to the beautiful stuff that nature has created. And I enjoy shooting both of those. So it was just a passion and something that I knew I could spin up because I've created businesses before.
Mm, I love it. I sometimes when I'm photographing for fun and I'm in a built environment that is really cool, I almost think it's like cheating, uh, as an artist because I didn't build that. I didn't design the lines or I was
Hmm.
where was I? There's a beautiful museum in Indiana, in Indianapolis. I was there for yeah, visit family No, a family wedding. That's why I was there. And the architecture of that building was so much fun. And I actually used part of it for my Christmas card. There was a big sculpture of the word love. And yeah, so I can see how you could be drawn to that. So I would love if you could share from your perspective the different kinds of architectural photography. I have had architectural photographers on the show, but they were mostly doing real estate and things like that. So can you talk about, it's like with photography of people, there's weddings and portraits and babies and eh, candids and, lots of categories. So I'm going to stop asking you the question 10 times and see what you had to share.
So there are, if you're shooting things that don't talk back and don't smile, which is mainly buildings, the you've got real estate sort of at the bottom end, and I'm only saying that in a way to mean the photographs are only useful for a limited period of time. They're to help a real estate agent sell a property. Once the property is sold, the photographs are useless, and nobody pays any attention to them. Above that is both interiors and exteriors, where someone is trying to capture a portfolio of their work. They're either interior designers and they're artists in the way that they bring furniture and furnishings and color and textures together, or they're the architect designing the structure in which the interior designer is doing their work. There, in both cases, those photographs could be useful for 50 years. And you visited that museum that you mentioned, but there are many people who won't visit that museum. But my job is to capture it and capture the feel of what it's like there for all the people who won't visit that structure, so that
Mhm.
they can see what the architect has done. And it is the architect's artwork, and I'm trying to capture their vision in 2 dimensions, given that what they produced is in 3 dimensions. And sometimes 4 dimensions, because the light changes throughout time, from morning to night. And you want to capture how the character of the building changes throughout the day. Um, so there are at least those 2 levels, portfolio level work that's going to be good for decades, and commercial work at the real estate level that's good for maybe 90 days.
Okay.
Um, and
So,
they pay at very different levels.
question on the real estate part, or let me tell you what I think and tell me if I'm on target or there's another thing, you know what I'm saying. Let me know if I'm on base. There's probably many different levels of real estate photography and different pay grades based on if you're selling a $500,000 uh I don't know how many. Anyway, speak, Lucy. I'm so tangled today. That, there's a architectural photography where you're doing someone's basic 3, 4 bedroom home in a nice community. And then there's more expensive art buildings and that need to be sold or promoted. And I'm guessing the pay would be different in those. The approach would be a little more detailed and kind of fine art photography for the higher end um, buildings. Uh, am I on target? Can you clean up what I just
You
say?
So yes, whenever the goal is to sell a building, the pay is probably 1/10 of what it is when you're trying to capture somebody's design portfolio.
Okay, that's not my
Uh,
question. My
I know,
question
but if you
is all kinds of
it
buildings that I was
within,
trying to
go
sell the
ahead.
building. And like I've seen architectural photographers who were selling somebody's $10 million home that spent an entire day lighting and doing all kinds of things. And then there's what I think of normally as real estate, which is to go in and capture in a great way a home that may sell, to a family. So, am I making any sense at all to anybody?
There are differences, whether it's a $300,000 home or a $3 million home, but that is mainly determined by the real estate agent. There's one person here in Philadelphia who the cheapest home she'll take is $2 million. It goes up from there, and she doesn't pay that much more for her photographs than the person who's photographing a $300,000 home. That's just her business model. She wants 50 photographs. She wants it cheap. And I won't name names, but that's her business model. There are others who, if they're selling a $3 or $4 million house, they want photographs that are really do it justice. She doesn't have to have terrific photographs to sell her home because of just the way she markets and whatever. So yes, there is a difference in price. It might be, if it's $200 for that lower level house, it might be $400 or $500 for the higher level house. In both cases, it's probably less than $1,000. An architectural shoot will be, it starts at probably 2,500 and goes up to $10,000 or $15,000. So
Okay.
it's a whole different level. Again, because the photos are useful for decades.
Right.
And it's that use that determines its value, not the value of the property being shot.
Got it. Got it. Now I'm guessing that you listen to my podcast with the architect, with the real estate photographer who creates packages and layers and videos and will upsell to thousands of dollars for that entry level. And that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, there's money to be made in all of it. I want to know about your specialty, of course. That's what we're here for. So, how do you get the work, first of all?
Good question. From a social media standpoint, I only use LinkedIn because that's where my customers are. They're not on Facebook. They're not on, some of them are on Instagram, but I see more photographers on Instagram than I do architects. I have several thousand architects that I'm connected to on LinkedIn. I also have, again, from my internet marketing background, I have an email list of several thousand architects here in the Philadelphia area. And I email them once a month with my recent photos and a call to action to look at my portfolio, just to let them know I'm still alive, still in business. And because when they're ready to shoot is variable, it could be any time of the year. I just need to be there at the moment they're thinking about getting a photographer. I also have printed portfolios that I mail out, small, like 5-inch by 5-inch booklets that I mail to particular architects that I want to work for. I have a very large printed portfolio booklet that's 11 by 17 that I'll meet with people in person and have them walk through the printed portfolio, and we talk about how it was done and how it relates to their work. When I get an in-person meeting and they look through that book, I have a 90% probability of getting business from that prospect.
I love it. Okay, so LinkedIn and a robust email list that you created. Where did that list come from again?
I got that list from a list broker that I had. It's oddly enough, it's no longer in business. I guess there's a collection of business newspapers. The Philadelphia Business Journal is what it's called here.
Mm-hmm.
They used to be in dozens of cities. and they had a database of millions of businesses that you could slice and dice by SIC code and by geography. And I had uh, subscribed to that list and selected all of the architects and interior designers and builders and developers in the Philadelphia area, downloaded the list, and began emailing to it. When
Okay.
people unsubscribed, it's like, fine, if you're not interested. At this point, 2,000 people, continue to receive the emails, and I know, who opens them, and I know who clicks on them, and I actually follow up by phone to the people who clicked
Oh,
and looked at my portfolio.
okay.
So
So you mail out printed portfolios. You have in-person get-togethers and show your big book, and then you call people. So with the mailers, where did you get the addresses to do snail mail portfolios, or how did
well,
that come about?
so the portfolios only go out to maybe 25 people a year. And once I have seen that these people have opened my emails and have clicked on my portfolio, and I've looked at their website and decided I really like their work and would like to capture it. Because there's some architects that I just don't like their work.
Mm-hmm.
The style of the buildings that they do is not something that excites me. I prefer very modern designs. And so people who do very, I think it's boring, but it's very traditional looking buildings. Some of them are very expensive, but it's like, I'm just not interested. It doesn't float my boat. It's quite easy once you know that you like architect ABC, go to their website and get their address. And if you're only doing 25 of them a year, it doesn't take long to collect that data, write a customized email saying why you like their work, what projects you saw on their website excited you, and here's my portfolio. Would you like to meet and talk about your marketing needs?
Mm.
And you just keep emailing and calling until you get a meeting, or they say, we're really happy with the person we're using. And at that point, you back off and go on to the next one.
Yeah. So you're very proactive. You're not just posting something on LinkedIn, crossing your fingers and hoping for the best.
No,
You're pursuing. And
it's very, very targeted.
when you make a phone call, what is that phone call like? How do you approach that? How do you get through to the person you want to talk to? A lot of the younger people are not experienced in using telephones like you and I are. So,
You mean you can make phone calls with these things? They
yeah,
they
not
do
just take
phone?
pictures and text. So, so how do you decide to call somebody? You might have already mentioned that, but I just want to put a asterisk on that.
So they opened an email. They looked at my portfolio. Their work is work that I would like to photograph. I mail them a letter and the portfolio booklet, and I call and ask to speak with them and say that I've sent a portfolio to them and just following up. If I've got a gatekeeper, and sometimes I have to find out who's the right person to talk to. It
Mhm.
might have been a partner that opened the email, but the marketing person is someone else in the firm. And they direct me to the marketing person, and then I begin the whole process over again with the marketing person. The email follow up always has a link to my portfolio, and so if someone lost the booklet or whatever, they can always click the link and see my photos there. Um, and it's hi, I'm an architectural photographer in Philadelphia. I like your work. I'd like to photograph it. Here's my portfolio. Can we talk about your marketing needs? Do you have any projects that are finishing up and are portfolio worthy? Uh, and we just take it from there. They or either say, yes, we're interested in looking at new photographers, or no, we've used the same person for 40 years, and until they die, we're going to keep using them.
Hmm.
Uh,
And so then you start putting a hit out on them. Just kidding.
no, but I have picked up work from people who have retired.
Ah,
Um, the client will call and say, our regular photographer moved out of the area, retired, decided they don't want to do this anymore. Would you be interested?
interesting.
Um, and the fact that I've contacted them 3 or 4 times in the past, and they've received my emails every month. Again, they when they have a need, they will contact me because we've had multiple contacts in the past.
So what I'm hearing that is a little different than when those of us that fall in love with photography and decide I'm gonna start a business, and the dream is that we get to photograph all the time. Because you have a business background, you approach this like you would any, everything has its own twist, but you approach it as you would other businesses. And the photography is something you love and enjoy, but at the same time, this is a business for you, and you get to use all of that history that you have. So
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
yeah, and I'm guessing you enjoy that part.
It it can be a lot of fun
Yeah.
to land a client, and I send out custom proposals for every job. There's you mentioned packages that real estate photographers have. I don't have any packages. Everything is, what's the story you're trying to tell with this project? How many photos do you think you'll need to tell the story? Where is it located? And I'll come up with a custom proposal for, this is what it's going to cost to have me come and show up, shoot it, edit it, provide you with a license to use the photos. Um, Primarily based on how many photos you need and distance. If I've got to stay overnight or travel, then those expenses get added in.
Hmm.
I usually have an expense for an assistant um, who is there to help me move furniture and set up lighting and things as we move through the space.
So that is the lead into what my next question is, which is how you approach a job. So what I heard in that is, first you learn what the story is that you want to tell, what the usage would be, uh, the location. So how else do you approach a job? I know there's composition, there's all kinds of things when you're looking at, oh, here's a building. Now what?
Now, well, one of the first things I do is I'll say 95% of the time I've got someone from the client on site who is there to be the director of the shoot and make decisions. They'll tell me that for a recent shoot, this lobby was important. And I'll say, okay, what about the lobby? Well, the fact that we have wood up here and we have these glass cases that we care about and the custom tile work we did. Okay, fine. I'll pull out my iPhone and we'll walk through all of the spaces, and I will take iPhone photos set to match my good equipment, the aspect ratio and the focal length. And I'll say, okay, here's how I think we should shoot this. And I may shoot different angles and show them on my phone. They'll go, I like the second one. We'll delete the ones they don't like, move on to the next space. We'll walk through all the spaces and come up with a visual shot list. They said originally they thought they needed 10 photos. We end up with 11 or 8, whatever it is. And then once we have that, we move through actually doing the shoot. Sometimes I do that scout the day before or weeks before while the building's still being constructed. Other times I do it first thing in the morning.
Hmm.
And, it's the first part of the shoot. The Once we've done that, it's a matter of setting up the camera in the same place. And I tether the camera to an iPad. So it's showing the client exactly what the camera sees, what's in the frame, what's out of the frame. To your original quote, I'm making sure that the bumpers on the pool table are in the right place, and that the things that they want to see are in there. And if they go, we really don't like what the client built over here, move that out of the frame, move the camera over. And then we style it. How a space looks in 3 dimensions when you're standing in it is not the way the camera sees it. Things that are closer to the camera look too large. Things that are further away could look too small. So we move things. If there's a plant that's in front of something they care about, we move the plant, and somebody is actually looking at the iPad while they move the plant, knowing that, okay, I'm moving it. Okay, that's where I need it to be. Once we've got the furniture where we want it, the interior where we want it, we'll take the picture, usually multiple exposures at different exposure levels, and then I add lighting. I've got numerous high-powered flashes that we use to color correct, because the light coming in could be blue, or it could be green because of the trees, or yellow because of the sun. And they care what color the rug was. They spent a lot of time thinking about it.
Right.
So I will make sure that I put 5,500 Kelvin light on that rug and that the colors are perfect. I might even shoot with a gray card that helps me correct the white balance to match what the real colors are. And when I feel like I've got all the data I need from an exposure standpoint and a lighting standpoint, we break everything down, put everything back the way we found it, move on to the next space.
So, question, because I love all of this step-by-step technical. I know there's also composition factors and lens choices and things. How does that come into play? Especially composition. I know you're not just like, hey, I'm putting this here, boom. So tell me from that standpoint, just a little deeper about the composition.
Sure. So it starts with the story. Generally, there's something about the space that they're trying to communicate. We were shooting in an adult living facility for people, who retired and have moved in. And the story they wanted to tell was how much it felt like home. That the living room felt like a living room, and the dining room felt like a dining room. And by the way, they were connected. So that meant I needed shots that showed from the dining room out to the living room, from the living room back into the dining room. There were gigantic windows in the dining room with sun streaming in, and they wanted to capture that because that's part of the appeal. You're not in a cave. You're in an area that filled with light and trees, and it's a wonderful place to live when you're 60 years old or 80 or 90 years old. So that story then said where I needed to place the camera. They would say, oh, make sure you get that little desk over there. We want to show that because the desk in the dining room is important. Okay, so we either angle the camera that way, or I use a tilt shift lens, which allows me to shift the scene without moving the camera. And I might use that to shift to the left, take a picture that includes that desk, shift to the right and take a picture of the rest of the room. And then in post, I'll blend those two pictures together seamlessly so that you can see everything without it being a super wide shot, which looks distorted. A wide angle lens will make things look kind of wonky on the edges. But the tilt shift lens avoids that. So it starts with the story. And what do you put in the picture, and what do you keep out of the picture?
Got it. Now, it might be just instinctual to you, but do you use rule of thirds, Fibonacci's thing? Like when I first think of the word composition, I think of basic principles of composition. Not that we always have to follow those, but does that come into play when you're making the plans and designing the shot?
Absolutely. I would say the Fibonacci curve less so than perhaps rule of thirds. Leading lines, negative space, those kinds of things enter into it. And this particular shoot that I'm thinking of, there was a hallway, and we wanted to shoot it in such a way that you could see the interesting lights they had put outside each of the doors where people's rooms were, but also the fact that there were multiple doorways. And so the floor and the ceiling added leading lines that caused you to look down the hall, and making sure that the end of the hall was lit a little brighter, so that your eye was drawn all the way through the photograph. The Sometimes I'm doing vignette shots where they want to highlight a particular piece of woodwork or something that was special millwork. And for that, I might put that right on the rule of thirds, so that it's not dead center, but I've got it off a little bit. And I've chosen a focal length that allows the background to be fuzzy, and the foreground, whatever we're trying to highlight, is sharp. The same way you do in a portrait, because I'm taking a portrait of a sink.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
or some millwork, in that sense.
So
So yes, go ahead.
yeah, I love it. Early in my career, I had a friend who was moving from an apartment that she decorated beautifully. And she said, I want pictures so I can remember. It was like her first apartment, and she really had an eye for things. And it's the only time I've officially done architectural photography.
Mm-hmm.
And everything you're talking about, I still see some of the images that I took. And I mean, this was a one-bedroom apartment, but I approached it like they're little mini vignette works of art and
Mm-hmm.
composition, and I really, really enjoyed it. I don't love commercial photography like a product or things like that, but I can see the appeal, uh, especially since when I travel, I love to photograph the architecture that was built, 1,000 years ago, or the cathedrals or architecture. Like, probably people would be surprised, people that love to travel, how many architectural photographs they actually take on a regular basis
Mm-hmm.
when they're traveling. Uh,
Sure.
yeah. So, oh, another, just a little aside that kind of blew my mind. The person that designed my logo and branding was a graphic artist for architects.
Mm-hmm.
And she explained a building. And, as you were sharing your approach, I was thinking about this building. There's a building in Spain that was designed with the picture of the inside of a matador's cape. That
Okay.
was that was the core. And when I saw the pictures that she took, um, I could see that at the end of this mall, it was, did I say it was a mall? It was a shopping center. There,
Mm-hmm.
there was an arch that was like a cathedral, and, I could see the intent. And so if you were going in there, then I imagine that would be a key thing, and you'd look for those elements, and you'd want to learn, like, how does how were you inspired by the inside of a matador's cape for this feature of this building? Am I on track? Is that?
Absolutely. And so that's part of the story that they would want to tell. And then my job is to figure out, how do I use composition and lighting and lens choice and everything else to capture that in a way that someone looking at it later goes, oh, I get it. I see
Mhm,
what they were trying to do. And
mhm.
that's the problem solving aspect of my work. Given that problem of how do I capture that aspect. Um, but the other side of it is there's also an instinctual thing that when
Hmm.
I walk through a space, I look for things that catch my eye. And and every once in a while, it's something that the architect didn't see. It wasn't they thought about, something that they thought about. And I'll take the photograph and show them, and they'll go, "That's great. I've never seen that before. I didn't know the light hit that way and produce that kind of a view." And sometimes that's the photo that they use as the main photo for the project because it's something different that they haven't seen. And I don't have any way of teaching that.
Hmm.
I've worked with people. It's just something that people hire me for my eye. Certainly for my marketing ability and technical ability, but also I just see something and go, okay, this is what I want to capture that I think just looks cool and would make a future client say, I'd like to work with this person.
Hmm. Well, you kind of have me thinking maybe I should start a new career because I really, I do love spaces and when how light hits and um, you know, as I said, when I'm traveling, I am always looking for those things that catch my eye or the design
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, if I felt like I wanted to start a new career, I I never thought until today, I was today years old when I thought about this, that that could be really fun. Sounds really fun.
Mm-hmm.
Is it
It
fun?
is. It is fun.
What's the most
It
fun
is fun.
part?
The, there are times where I will just go out and shoot a building because I think it's a cool building.
Mhm,
We have there's the Temple University Library that happens to be the first image that's on my website. Uh, I went there to shoot it just because it's a beautiful building and it's a public space. They'll let you go walk through all 4 floors. And I just went there and spent a day just walking through it and looking at what the architect did and taking pictures only of things that caught my eye. It was my story, not the architect's story. I really didn't care what the architect was trying to communicate. It was just what was catching my eye about their work. And I probably took 20 or 30 photographs, and I kept maybe 3 or 4 that have become part of my portfolio. um, and it just that's exciting. That's fun to know that I've captured something that caught my eye, and other people have looked at it and said, "Wow, that's really cool looking."
I love it, I love it. So, how would you suggest someone start?
To become an architectural photographer,
Mhm,
interesting. I've been corresponding with a woman who's been doing real estate photography and uh, personal branding photography for women. So
mhm,
headshots that bring out the personality of the women business person, female business person. She's asked how can she get into architectural photography, and we're going to have a conversation tomorrow, about that. And I suggested that she go to a nearby university, Boise State, because they have some really cool buildings there. And I said, shoot them. I mean, I'd love to go there and shoot some of the buildings I saw that they look really amazing. Universities seem to have money to do
mhm,
buildings in a cool way. Um, so the one of the first steps is you got to get really good technically.
mhm,
Um, if your photographs aren't, you know, out perfect, they can't be sloppy. They can't be out of focus. They can't be crooked. They can't be poorly lit. Um, they can't be poorly composed. They have to be interesting. Uh, Technically, both to shoot and edit, you've got to be on top of your game. Then you've got to create a portfolio. And the portfolio should be the kind of work that you want to shoot. Because an architect will say, not, well, you've never shot a restaurant before, but we'll hire you anyway. No problem. We know you can do it. And it's like, no, they want to see a restaurant.
Hmm.
Somebody asked me if I ever shot stained glass, and I've actually shot in a synagogue and in a 200-year-old church. The stained glass wasn't the main feature. This is a stained glass company that's asking, but I could show them what I did, and they said, "That's good. You know, that's exactly the kind of shot we want." So you need a portfolio of the kind of work you want to do. And you have to decide, well, what do you want to do? Do you want to do residential? You want to do commercial? You want to do interiors? You want to do exteriors? Um, and I do all of those. So, and I do it from a drone as well as from the ground. And you have to have examples of those that where everything is good. Then you need to target. Who do you want to shoot for? You know, is it local architects? Is it national? And you need to reach out to them and get them to see your work online or in person or through the mail. And you need to talk to them and build a relationship and keep coming back whenever they have a project that they feel is portfolio worthy and they want to shoot it. And then you need to be able to create a proposal that is correctly priced. Not too high, not too low. You go too low, they figure you don't know what you're doing. You go too high, they don't have budget. Um, and
So
But you
like
need to
this,
be high enough.
so
Go
like
ahead.
three bears, not too hot, not too cold. You need it just right.
Right. My rates are not the highest in Philadelphia, but they're also not the lowest. I'm probably, you know, a little bit above the mean,
Hmm.
and and that's where I want to be from a pricing standpoint. It makes it worthwhile for me to do the job, but fitting within the budget.
Got it. I love it. So I had a question. You didn't talk about photographing exteriors. Is there
Hmm.
something that people would need to know? Because I'm guessing when you're doing a job, it's probably really natural to show the outside as well as the interiors. But are there a couple key things you need to know about photographing the whole building or not little snippets of cool things outside, but like the building
The
itself?
whole building, right?
Yeah.
So absolutely. In fact, that's one of the things I need to talk to this woman about tomorrow. Everything, you know, my background in landscape photography, I have no control over the sun. I have no control over the clouds in the sky. I have to work with the light that I have, and I can pick interesting light, which is generally at the beginning of the day or the end of the day. Um, but I need to have light that highlights the architectural details that the architect cares about. So in general, I've got software that'll tell me the angle of the sun in relationship to the front of the building. In fact, I'll stand in front of the building and look for when is the sun going to rake across the front to show all of the details of the texture of the building. This is the opposite of what you do in a portrait. You don't want to have that kind of light that shows all the wrinkles and
Right.
imperfections of somebody's face, but I want that in architecture. Not for the imperfections, but to show the brickwork or um, the way the building juts out and then comes back, which those shadows are going to show the depth of the building. If the sun is behind me lighting the building from the front, everything flattens out and I can't see the volume of the building, and I'm trying to capture the volume. So lighting is first. Um, the Where I stand depends again on the story. What are we trying to tell here? There's a building downtown, a nanotechnology building on the Penn University campus that has a cantilevered portion of the building that sticks out probably 80 feet from the building, and there's nothing holding it up.
Oh,
It's just hanging out there. Well, that's something that the architect probably spent a lot of time and energy figuring out. So you want to stand in a place that shows that. It might be, there's another building that's being built right now that has solar wind sails on every window
Ooh.
that uh, it looks like sailboat sails. And they're there because this is a building that's doing research on energy and how do you make things energy efficient. And when I walked down the street, I saw this, being built and went, holy crap, that's beautiful.
Mm.
And I took a shot just of those sails. Um, Later, I took pictures of the entire building showing the sails from a drone. Um, but it was like, and I needed to, if I shot it from the south side of the building, the sails looked stupid. But if I shot it from the west side of the building, the light hit it and showed that each of these sails were rounded. They weren't flat. Um, and so it's looking for the light that's
Mhm.
going to show, the detail, the architectural details of the building as a whole. So I'm going to find a position that shows the whole building. I need to get to a position that the light looks good. Sometimes they want to show the north side of the building in the winter. And
Mm.
guess what? The sun never hits the north side of the building in the winter.
Right.
And it's like, well, if you want that, I have to shoot it on June 21st.
Hmm.
But on December 21st, doesn't matter. It's going to be in shade.
And you can't bring lights.
Well, you can't light a building
I
with them.
know.
I don't have a.
Yeah.
You're right. You can't bring lights that are bright enough to make a difference.
What about
Um,
HDR? Can you under, over, find a little sweet?
the it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I've tried it. Yes, I always shoot multiple exposures. Two stops under, two stops over, and I'm blending it together. But having the natural highlights that come from the sun in the right place is pretty much impossible to fake,
Right.
or impossible to create in Photoshop. Um, you, the picture just won't be as good. Um, so, you know.
So that brings me to another thought I had before we wrap up. Do you, um, okay, so there was a photographer that did a program on architectural photography, and uh, I don't know if it was for the architect or the person selling it, but it was pre-digital, pre all the groovy things that make things
Mhm.
now. And sometimes he would go back and back and back until the sky was good. But
Yeah,
nowadays we can put in good sky. Is that something that you use in your architectural exteriors as needed so that there's an interesting or an appropriate sky in the background? What are your thoughts on
absolutely. I have 500 skies in my library.
that? Okay.
I have 50 lawns. I have 25 different forms of asphalt. Quite often, I'm asked to shoot something before it's finished,
Uh-huh.
and so I have to lay in new asphalt, and I have to put in landscaping that isn't there yet. Uh, I would say I change the sky probably 90% of the time,
Mm.
because I want a sky that adds to the photo. I may want leading lines in the sky. I want the clouds to come down and sort of point to the building. I may want a color that's different than the bright blue sky. I want something with a little bit more golden color. Uh, so I'll change the sky. Uh, I remove things quite frequently. Generative AI is my friend.
Hmm.
I'm getting rid of cars and trucks. We added people in the last shoot that I did. It was on a college campus, and we couldn't control where the students go. They're like cats. And sometimes they'll be where we wanted them. Sometimes they weren't. And the architect would look at the photo in the end and say, I wish you had a person back there on that balcony. And we'd go in and use generative AI to create a person, and we'd keep generating and generating until we got a person that looked realistic. And, it It was just to show that that was a space where you could stand. It was a balcony,
Mm,
or there was light back there, and we wanted to call attention to the light. Um, so it wasn't a sterile picture. So yeah, I'm constantly removing, adding. It could be skies, it could be asphalt, it could be people, it could be trees. It's signs. Exit signs are my bane.
yeah,
Got to remove
yeah.
outlets,
That's
wiring.
those are those are the easy bits, uh, usually. So my first, I used to be this purist, and I wanted things more like what I shot. And then when I discovered the potentials, uh, I was like, oh, okay, maybe I need to come into the 21st century. And there was a family that they were all in town. They called me the morning, and they were all in town for that day, and they'd not been together in 20 years, and who knows when they'd come together. And the grandpa couldn't really get around much, so we used their yard. And luckily, there was a bank of bushes or trees that
Mhm.
provided the right lighting, because I don't bring a bunch of lights. I like to find the light.
Sure.
But the yard was terrible. And so I ended up early, I can't remember what it was called, but there was a program where you could buy, like, I put a chicken in a photograph once for fun for a family, uh, because her decor was upscale barnyard in her kitchen, and so we needed a
Needed
chicken.
chicken.
So I replaced the lawn, and I built a whole garden with flowers and things, and
Yep.
I was pretty impressed with myself. It took, I probably spent 2 days on it because I, really wasn't skilled, but yeah, you got to do what you got to do. I love now that I can take a picture with a telephone pole or a tree sticking out of somebody's head that I know. I just take that
Ellen,
out. I'm not, it's not a mistake, it's intentional. So the freedom of that is fun. So, well, gosh, I'm so glad you got in touch with me and said, hey, I've listened to a lot of your shows, and you got very few architectural photographers and none with what I'm doing. So I know my listeners are so excited to hear this. And so many of your principles, like your marketing, it's it's just marketing 1A, which is build relationships. That's that's what it
mhm.
starts with. Not, I have an ebook. Um, I'll be doing episode number 3. I'm doing
Yeah, you're up to three.
a review, and it's called 10 Big Ideas for Marketing in the Real World. And because because good grammar, Lucy. Um, and it's about, like, get out of your chair and go do something. I I like the um I've mentioned this before, but there was a guy who put weather balloons on his lawn chair. Did you ever hear that story?
Yes, I heard that story. You had talked about that.
Yeah, and he got up into, like, airplane airspace, and when they brought him down and said, "Why did you do that?" He said, "Well, you can't just sit there." So, yeah, or get out and kill something. The buzzards story. So, anywho, so gold star that you actually listened enough to this show that you remembered that story. It just always stuck with me. Okay, so I just sidetracked myself. So before we go, was there anything else I had on my mind and then I talked over myself? Well, if it pops in my head, I will bring it up. But one question, how do people see your work, get in touch with you? If they want to reach out, ask questions, are you open to that? And how would they do that?
So the easiest way is to go to my website, jackzigon.com, and jackzigon.com. And my email address is on there, which is simple. It's just jack@jackzigon.com.
Mhm.
They can email. There's my cell phone numbers on there. If they want to see, that's where I put my portfolio. The work that I shoot recently and post is on LinkedIn. So if they have a LinkedIn, um, you know, they can search for Jack Zigon on LinkedIn and connect with me. I have,
Great.
thousands of people who've connected. And to the extent that LinkedIn shares my posts with everybody who's connected to me, because I really don't know what the algorithm is,
I know.
it just does what it does. But I post there usually weekly. There were times where I did it 2 or 3 times a week. Sometimes it's less. Depends on how busy I am. But that's where they'll see my most recent work. Some of it's, so those are the two ways, my website and LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Thanks. I totally understand now why after 8 other businesses, you weren't like, you know what? It's been good. I think I'll just sit and drink coconut drinks on a beach in Hawaii because this sounds so exciting. I mean, I'm sure you've got money in the bank and you're not like doing this because otherwise you're gonna starve. Uh, that you're doing this because it's fun and it's enriching
Yes.
and you get to build relationships and be creative and use the whole range of your background and skills. Am I accurate?
Yes.
Yeah. So, parting thought, either something you didn't mention that you like head slap, oh, I wish I'd have mentioned that one thing, or a thought you want to leave us with.
The um, if somebody's trying to get into this field, unlike when I got into it, there was very little information available that would teach you how to do it. There's now tons of courses and workshops that you can learn lighting and composition and equipment. Uh, I'd avail yourself of that. Fstoppers.com has a number of courses. There are workshops that I've attended and learned from. I would definitely suggest that you don't have to recreate the wheel.
Right.
I had to figure things out, and there was no one to teach me at that time. I just kept making mistakes until I figured out how to make something work. But there's now people who, here's how to do it, and here's where you stand, and here's why. So definitely search for those kinds of things online and on YouTube, and your path will be much faster than mine.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you, Jack, so much. This has been delightful. Remember everyone to stay tuned for my wrap up. And Jack, you're amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lucy. You too. You do a great job sharing your expertise with the world. You have a good day.
You too. Well, I gotta say, this gave me some exciting thoughts about fun things I can do um, that don't include people or that maybe random people that walk into an architectural scene. Uh, what am I trying to say? I'm very inspired by this. That's what I'm trying to say. So let me see if I can do a quick little wrap up. I took some good notes. First of all, we talked about the different kinds of architectural photography, and we talked a little about real estate photography and that there's a limited use for that. There can be different income levels, but basically, uh, it's moderate. And then he talked about work for the architects for portfolio work that can be used 50 years from now. When you build a building, a lot of them are going to be around a long time. So that's interesting. And we talked about marketing, and he uses LinkedIn. He has email lists that he emails once a month. He sends out printed portfolios to hot prospects, people that open his emails and that he likes their architectural designs. He sets up appointments with targeted potential clients and shows a big book of his work. He uses the telephone. All the same things in little different twists for wedding photography or portrait photography or branding photography. Marketing is marketing. And then I ask him how he approaches a job, and the first thing he does is find out the story that the architect wants to tell, and then he learns what's important. He has a system where he takes what used to be Polaroids in the olden days. He uses his phone to confirm with the people that he's working for that they like his ideas. What else? He adds his lighting and color correcting. He composes in a way that tells the story, is artistically pleasing. So it's a whole project. And then I asked how someone gets started, and he said universities are great places to photograph because there's money there. A lot of universities have very interesting designs. And he says you got to get really good technically. Something he mentioned after I stopped the recording is that the equipment for high-end commercial photography of architecture is very expensive, that you can't really get the top dollar and the best businesses with just average equipment. Tilt shift lenses can be $4,000, but there's good money in it, so it works out. He also says we want to create a portfolio if we're starting out, want to target who we want to work for and reach out and build relationships. That's so key to everything. And then be priced correctly for the work we're doing, the client that we want. If we're too low, they won't trust us. If they're too high, we might be out of their actual budget. So, that's an art. And then we talked about exteriors some and how he plans for that and uses the new digital and AI technologies. So that was just a really enjoyable conversation about a topic that I knew very little about. And maybe some of you out there are super excited. And what you're going to do later today or tomorrow is grab your camera and go somewhere where there's buildings and see what you can come up with for fun. So stay tuned for next time. Lots of good stuff. Be sure to check out LucyDoomlessCoaching.com and set up a quick little chat if you want to get a little guidance on anything. I'm here for you. All right. Bye.